Love you, Linda. Love you.
The courthouse the other day in the hallway, you're singing "Oh Happy Day."
One word prayer. Justice, where are you?
All right, don't make me do an examination. Hey,
I'm dressed for the Met Gala, and you're dressed for
yes,
for
I'm dressed
whatever.
for a usual day at the office. Welcome to Justice Served TV. Michael Bryant here.
Linda Kenny Bodden here. By the way, everyone always wants to know about fashion. We normally do Fashion Fridays, but since you're doing Blue Monday, just want to let you know, these are from Diana Vreeland. If you are interested in fashion, tonight is the Met Gala. These are the earrings that were made for her by my friend Ricky Serban. She was the editor of Vogue before Anna Wintour. So here I am wearing them. So just give you a little fashion update before we get into the real issue of crime, what we do for a living.
My invite to the gala lost in the mail, apparently. So I did not get, or the check bounced, or both, one or the other. Okay, so obviously coming off day number 9 of the Karen Read case, we're going to do a recap. We have a special guest. We're going to get to that quickly as we can. But a couple of updates in the first couple of minutes. Aiden Carney, his latest battle against bail revocation has ended in his favor. I had the order here just a second ago, but it basically says, no, there was no contact in the, I think it was the April 21st show. There was a show that was presented by Cosgrove, special prosecutor to the court, Judge Doolin. And their argument was, look, this violates the stay away order, the no contact order, the threat order. And the judge took it under advisement, strangely enough, told Mr. Carney, you're on thin ice. But that ice, he survived and he skated through. And so that has been done.
He skated through, and the order since the comments do not violate the court's order to have no contact, direct or indirect, with the witness, nor do they, without more, constitute a new criminal offense. And also, the words were stated by defendant, a journalist, on his YouTube video. By the way, I only say that because remember how Massachusetts doesn't recognize YouTube streaming as journalism? Well, I gather they do. Thank you, Judge Doolin.
Yeah, they selectively do. And we'll find out more about our press situation this week when I'm back up there. So that was good. Good news for Aiden. The other follow-up on another collateral issue is the lawsuits brought by A, the protesters. These are federal suits. B, the journalists, myself and Tom CPU, and the gentleman who was stripped of his sticker, Mr. Delgado. The second of the 3 cases and the third of the 3, the journalist and Mr. Delgado, had been stayed because the first case, the protesters' request for a TRO, temporary restraining order, to prevent enforcement of the buffer zone. It sounds kind of backwards. What are you asking to do? Well, you're asking somebody not to do something, really, and that is not to enforce the buffer zone. That went up on appeal to the First Circuit. That was argued today. So I heard from my attorney, Mark Randazza, who's representing the protesters as well. He thought it went very well. He predicted a win, always very dangerous. But the court spent a lot of time trying to craft some sort of compromise that everybody would be happy with. And one of them that was offered by Mark was, hey, what if we just we don't bother the bus? The bus with the jurors on it. We don't want to bother anybody that's in the jury. We have no interest in doing that. We'll avoid that. He's also suggested maybe they could stay on the sidewalk, public sidewalk, and not violate any noise ordinances or restrictions. So he's trying to work with these folks. This is the court asking, what do you think we can do? And that's always a good sign, I think. So he believes there will be a 2-1 decision in their favor. We are.
But that's not your case.
No, we've been stayed. Because of that case, we've been stayed until May 14th. So I'm assuming, because that stay is in place, it's May 5th now, that sometime this week we will get the decision from the First Circuit that will impact our stay, because obviously if they grant the TRO for the protesters, it's going to trickle down onto our case as well. So that's the latest.
Speaking about noise, there was something funny actually brought to the attention But if you looked at Aiden Carney's Twitter account today, which I did go do to try to go get the order, I figured it was the quickest way to copy the order. Apparently today, the Canton, whatever you call them, that takes care of the lawn, decided to mow the lawn in the rain where the free Karen Reed people congregate outside the buffer zone, on the edge of the buffer zone. And you know what they were using besides mowing the lawn, and when there was going to be cross-examination of former police officer Gallagher, now Mr. Gallagher, on cross-examination?
Were they using some police evidence and collection devices?
Collection device. They were using leaf blowers.
Yeah.
You can't make it up. You know the kind of leaf blowers that you can control much more easily
Yes.
than anything else.
It's better than a shovel. So much better than a shovel. Okay, so do the honors. Introduce our guest. We're going to get into this. The legitimacy of any of the police work we've now heard about from Lieutenant Paul Gallagher. Go ahead.
Well, the person who wrote the book, teaches the course, is a great police expert, and we'll take what he has to say, not with any grain of salt. We'll take it whether it's good, bad, or indifferent for Karen Reed, because we told you we are the network that just says, hey, follow the Constitution. If she's guilty, convict her beyond a reasonable doubt. If she's not guilty, go away. But don't try to do it with some ridiculous evidence and try to justify it. But today is a perfect day to have the Sarge on. Joe, here you are,
Joe.
Yeah, who has his own podcast. So we're going to actually have him introduce his own podcast. And then we're going to get into playing some testimony and have Joe comment on it. And I can't wait to hear whether or not it's innovative and whether he teaches to use leaf blowers.
Do you have Leaf Blower 101? Was that a class?
No, that was when we heard about that last year. That was the first time I think I've ever heard that one. So, there's some issues for sure. We're gonna get into it, but
All right.
the main thing also, and we always we taught our detectives, and we talk about it, and I've written about this, is document, document, document. And when it's not documented, boy, you have a difficult time to discuss what really happened in court, and leaves you wide open. And I think we're seeing that right now.
It just looks so
crime.
careless.
I'm sorry, True Crime
right?
with the Sarge is your podcast because you're
Oh,
you're just too shall we say, you don't promote yourself enough, Joe. So we're promoting you. True Crime with the Sarge. There you go.
Now, yeah, thanks. Self-promotion was never one of my
I'm with you.
areas of expertise, but thank you. Yes, True Crime with the Sarge. It's right here on YouTube also, and I've written a couple of books, and I teach. So that's basically who I am.
What are the books?
I've written 2 books: The Criminal Investigative Function, a guide for new investigators. It's in its 4th edition, and the Cold Case Handbook, which is now in its 2nd edition. So
Wow,
that's
great.
where I'm headed with that.
So is the 5th edition going to have the leaf blower section added to it? Is that going to be a whole new part of the book?
No, but it will have. This is, and I've spoken about this. I've mentioned this in my class, of course. But this case is going to make textbooks for sure. So if I ever end up writing a 5th edition, unfortunately, you learn from a lot of these cases. And for instance, I had added some things in there from the OJ case in the book about what not to do, like knowing where all your detectives are at any given time, so you're not sending them from crime scene A to crime scene B, and then you transfer evidence and you end up in a big mess, like we saw in OJ's case. So yes, this case is definitely going to take on a new life, not only in training from across the country, but it's also going to make some textbook material.
Yeah, you mentioned the importance of note taking, which is why I now wear gloves for my note taking, because I heard in trial today that's really the best way to take notes from an EMT. So we're going to get into some of that testimony. Should we just launch right into the cross-examination? Because I think that's where we learn the most.
Of who?
This is the cross-examination of Lieutenant Paul Gallagher by, of course, Alan Jackson. He is the guy who was, how do I describe it? He's with Canton Police. Remember, when there's a case that involves a death, Canton and most of the other communities in Massachusetts immediately turn it over to the Massachusetts State Police, which is what they did here. So there was a handoff. But before that handoff, we had Mr. Leaf Blower, Mr. Solo Cup take over. So let's listen to some of this. We'll just stop and start, Joe, whenever you feel like, oh, that's worth commenting on. I'm going to zoom through to get to the right spot here. Stand by. Yeah, we'll just go. I thought we'd go right to the cross because it's really where the guts come out of this case. Let's see, where are you? I have this obviously very well orchestrated and planned.
There he is.
There he
Notice
is.
notice on the cross, Alan Jackson refers to him as Mr. because he is retired.
Yes, he is. Everybody retired, quit, got fired. Oh, this was some of the evidence being opened up. We might as well, let's look at a little of this, just get your take on how this was done. Now, this was shown in the first trial, Joe, so this has been retaped, right? Would that be normal?
Yeah, that's what they have to do that every time they open it
Yeah.
up in court or for something for testing. But there should be a chain of custody on that too, meaning
Is there an item in that bag?
who did it
There
and
is.
when they
Could you
did it
please open the
and
bag
why
and
they
show
did
us
it.
what's in there?
And you'll notice if you look at that bag, that it does look like newer tape is on it, right? There's a tape from 2022, and then there's tape from last
bag.
year.
Right.
And
I'm
you
glad
talk
they
about
found it.
Talking about chain of custody, when we did Hernandez up in Massachusetts, we had a chain of custody that was computer generated. I think I showed it on a previous show. Every single time somebody even sniffed near a piece of evidence, it was noted on the computer evidence log. Here, there was no evidence log, apparently.
Yeah, chain of custody is so important. That's why it's usually written either on the bags themselves or at least on a sheet, so you can identify who had it and when they had it and what they did with it. Because when you're dealing with certain evidence, specifically biological evidence, you can contaminate it. And then if we have another sample in there, at least you know who to test and eliminate.
I do think it's funny he puts the gloves on here. Now he cares. Now he's got the gloves.
Thank you. If you could put it back in the bag and the bag back in the box, please.
And what was that, Michael Bryant?
That was the glass, the cocktail glass, with a kind of a crescent-shaped chunk out of the top rim. So, you know, we'll find out whether they found other
Lieutenant
chunks
Gallagher,
later.
does that appear to be the same item that you found in the area where John O'Keefe was at Fairview that morning?
Yes, it does.
I'd like to have the box and the item marked for identification, please.
Okay.
Yeah, at this point, I don't think that matters, Micah.
It's all show. It's really all show. I mean, at
When
this
you were
point.
looking around the area that was pointed out to you as where John O'Keefe was found, did you expand across the front lawn into the street during your search?
No, we didn't, with the exception of uncovering the 6-foot asphalt berm.
Did you say 6 foot or is it?
Excuse me, 6-inch.
What's a berm?
It's it's basically a curbing, but it's made of asphalt. It's curved. You probably have seen it. It's asphalt. It's curved. It separates the street from property line.
Why did you clear that piece?
Wanted to see. We were trying to find out why John was having a medical issue, and we didn't know if he could have tripped over a curbing or what turned out to be an asphalt berm and possibly hit his head.
After you made efforts to look in that area, did you return to the Canton Police Department?
I did.
About what time?
It was shortly after 8 a.m.
After you returned to the Canton Police Department, did you receive any information or have a reason to return back to Fairview?
Yes,
About what time?
a little after 9 o'clock.
Why did you go back to Fairview after 9 o'clock?
Sergeant Lank got a phone call that Jen McCabe had more information.
Aha. Okay, so let's get it. You know, that's going to raise its ugly head again. Jen McCabe had more information. She's apparently on the force.
Correct?
Yes, they all are.
Okay, so they actually, it was odd in the terms of the video. They started the cross and they just showed
Take
Karen Reed
cuts
for a
that
while.
we've talked about. We'll talk more about those in a second. Those were utilized as well, correct?
They were, yes.
And you were responsible for the use of those as well.
Yes.
The solo.
So, my decision, yes.
In terms of the search of the scene, the recovery of evidence, the recovery of biological material, the use of tools to recover those biological materials, all of that rested at least ultimately at the scene on your shoulders, correct?
Yes, I did.
Isn't it true that you weren't interviewed in this case with regard to anything having to do with this case until April 3rd, 2024, correct?
Yes, we can call it an interview. It's when I met with the prosecutor, yes.
And that was about 2.5 years, nearly 2.5 years after this incident, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Michael Proctor, you know that name.
I do.
Who is Michael Proctor?
He was one of the troopers assigned to investigate the case.
As a matter of fact, he was the lead investigator for the case, correct?
I don't know if he was lead or trooper mechanic. I
You know, it's so confusing. Let me ask you this, Joe. Is that unusual 2+ years after the incident for the one of the critical on-scene policemen or Canton policemen to be interviewed by the DA? Is that odd?
Not necessarily, because he's a supervisor, right? So he was the lieutenant that was in charge of all this stuff. He technically, his job is to make sure that things get done, they get done right, and then he's got to sign off on them to make sure that they were done right. And that's where most of this problem lies. I mean, Lieutenant Gallagher, I think he was a lieutenant at the time, whatever. All of this, like the Alan Jackson just said, like it falls on his shoulders, the entire thing. And I was a supervisor in the squad. I know, I understand it exactly. And if something goes wrong, the chief or whomever is not asking the detectives what they did, or they're asking me or the lieutenant or whoever, what happened there, Joe? What did you do? What didn't you do? So to me, this has been a big supervisory problem from the get-go.
Well, let me ask you this. If the supervisor is doing more of the hands-on work, like he's manning the leaf blower and he's got the solo cups, does that change his role and as just a supervisor?
Yeah, we see this, with smaller departments in that respect, but this is the state police, right? This isn't the Canton police that has, X number of officers. This is the state police. We know that the blizzard really put a damper on response and who actually, responded to the scene and when they responded to the scene. But the issue that comes down to is if you're going to take on all these roles, then you're going to be the one testifying. Then yes, he should have been brought in much earlier into the discussion with the district attorney.
Yeah.
Joe, let me just follow up on that before we do the
Yeah.
next episode. So he's with the Canton Police, and he's got a deputy chief above him, and then the chief above him. But everybody on the scene, even though he's the one that's in charge of, you go here, you do this, I find this, I put this, I okay this. He doesn't have a report. He didn't even document, we're going to see, where the blood stains allegedly were found, where the body was found, where the glass, he doesn't even document that glass we just saw, where that was found. Is that unusual?
Yeah, that's why when we first started talking about it, I said document. It's like buying a house, right? Location. If it wasn't documented, it wasn't done. That's pretty much the motto in investigative work. And you just open yourself up to all kinds of issues. And if bosses are going to get involved in this, or if that's their job or that's their role in certain things, because every police department runs things differently. You have supervisors doing this stuff, well, then they're the ones that are going to have to be the ones testifying in this. I don't care who the quote unquote case investigator was. I mean, if you're the crime scene person, you're it.
I think his attitude is all very interesting. People should keep an eye on this because he's retired. He doesn't have a care in the world. He's making his 300 plus. And it's almost like he's matter of fact about it. It's no big deal.
don't know.
As you sit here, you don't know that Michael Proctor was the lead case agent for...
I know he was one of them, yes.
Okay. Do you know that he was the lead investigator assigned to the case?
I don't. I had nothing to do with the DA's office.
Right. I know you didn't have...
I don't know how they assign their cases, counsel. I don't know what you want me to say. I can't say what I don't know.
Mr. Gallagher, I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking if...
I did not know he was lead. I knew he was one of the leads.
Okay.
I believe they do it in a tandem, but I'm not sure.
Okay. He may have had a partner, correct?
That is correct, yes.
But it's not unusual to have a lead case agent, the person who's responsible for most of the search warrant writing and the memorialization of documentation of evidence collection and the movement of evidence and booking into evidence, things like that.
That is correct, but I don't know anything about who wrote their affidavits or who logged their evidence in. I wouldn't know that.
You're also familiar with Yuri Buchanan, correct?
I know who he is.
You're also familiar with Lieutenant Tully.
I know, yes.
They're all Massachusetts State Police officers, correct?
Yes, they all are.
Did Michael Proctor interview you before April of 2024?
He did not.
Did Yuri Buchanan interview you before April of 2024?
No, he did not.
Did Lieutenant Tully interview you before April of 2024?
No, he did not.
Did anybody else from the Canton Police Department, your deputy chief or the chief, interview you formally about your conduct and responsibilities before April of 2024?
I don't understand that question.
Did anybody at Canton PD, separating out Massachusetts State Police,
Correct.
did you sit down at Canton PD and provide an interview with anybody at Canton PD about your conduct at the scene?
What do you mean by conduct?
Going to the scene, collecting evidence, securing evidence, transporting evidence, booking evidence, those kinds of things. Your conduct at the scene, sir.
Yeah, I briefed my superiors, yes.
Okay, other than briefing, was there a formal report written
No,
or a formal interview conducted of you?
no, absolutely not.
Okay. Tell us when you wrote your report about what happened at the scene, memorializing what you did at the scene.
I didn't.
You didn't write a report?
About the scene that day at the scene?
Correct, about this
I
investigation.
only did the metadata report. I did not write a report at the scene.
You never, in fact, the fact is you never wrote any report about what happened at the scene, correct?
Correct.
You didn't memorialize that in any formal way on Canton PD letterhead to describe what you did and how you did it at the scene.
No.
Not even a glove. He didn't even have a glove like the EMT had. At least
Normally, when you
had a
report
glove.
to a scene as a first responder, you would be expected to write a report about that, whatever that conduct is.
I'm not the supervisor, no.
What if you're the ranking person at a scene that ultimately turns into a homicide scene?
Well, we don't know it's a homicide scene at this time. We don't even know there's a crime committed at this time. My
Understood.
responsibilities are to make sure reports are written, not to necessarily write the reports myself. I'm the supervisor. It's
Although-
my job to make sure reports are written, evidence is logged, those types of things.
Under ordinary circumstances, you would respond to a scene as a supervisor, and you would oversee what other people are doing, what your
That's
subordinate-
correct.
Can I finish?
Sure.
I don't want to talk over each other.
I apologize.
You would want to supervise or oversee what your subordinate officers, whatever he or she might be doing or they might be doing, you're going to oversee that. But they're the ones actually conducting the investigation or picking up evidence or doing the interviews, writing those things of that nature.
Correct. Detective Sergeant Lake's investigation, yes.
So in that circumstance, you wouldn't be expected to write a report because all of that conduct is memorialized by others subordinate to the supervisor, correct?
Correct.
But in this case, quite the opposite happened. You were the one that was in the video utilizing the leaf blower, correct?
That's correct.
You were the one that actually exposed the drinking glass, correct?
Correct, yes.
You noted the drinking glass and actually called somebody else over to take a look at it, correct?
That's correct.
You directed someone, Sergeant Lang, to pick up the drinking glass and recover it as a potential piece of evidence, correct?
That is correct.
You noted the blood or the coagulation of blood in and around that area, correct?
That is correct.
You noted where you believe the drinking glass was, in other words, what location, if there were grid coordinates, where it would be, correct?
Correct.
And you instructed others to transport that important evidence back to Canton PD to have it booked, correct?
That is correct.
You also secured the plastic containers in which to recover the blood.
That is
right?
correct.
You also directed someone to get a bag to put the plastic containers in and ultimately transport it, correct?
That is correct.
So you would agree with me, Mr. Gallagher, that in this circumstance, you were the centerpiece of the recovery of evidence and the investigation as it was at that time in that limited context. You were the centerpiece of what was happening at the scene, correct?
And I made sure it was documented by Detective Sergeant Lang.
Oh, okay, so I mean, Alan Jackson is making my point. This guy was not just standing on, as we say, the sidewalk supervisor, watching these things happen, but he does say he did something with the metadata. What does that mean? And put that in context for us, Joe.
Metadata, the only thing I can think of is something with the photographs taken with the electronic, usually metadata has to do with digital evidence or digital information. But here's the thing. If he is actively doing something and locating evidence, yeah, don't do that if you're the supervisor. All right. You're not, that's not your job to be doing that. I remember when I first got into the detective squad, a lieutenant took me on the side and said, the thing that you really have to fight is the urge to get yourself involved. Sit back and let the detectives do their jobs. And that was something I took with me for the rest of my career working in the detective bureau. Because once you start getting involved and you start putting your hands into things, you become the centerpiece, like what he even said it. Now, there's a couple of things that Jackson said here that really didn't mean anything. Like so you ordered them to, get the bags or to get the things. Yeah, that doesn't mean anything. That's what his job was. But when you're actively finding evidence, pointing it out, and having people collect it, well, you're the one that first found it. You're the first chain of custody. Yeah. So the was Sergeant Lang, not Sergeant Lang. I forget the sergeant that he mentioned there, Lane.
Like, yeah.
Lang, yeah, he's going to write the report, and it's going to that report should say, well, Lieutenant Gallagher found this and pointed it out to me. I mean, that should have been the way it's written. Uh, but like I said, don't get involved if you're not going to write any reports on it, because this is what we have to deal with.
And he was the one, and I don't know if we passed it or it's coming to it. He's the one, Joe, that decided, well, let's go get a leaf blower and we can I'm sorry. I first saw this at Law and Crime, and we can blow away the snow and see what is there. I just can't. I mean, I have no comment on that type of evidence collection, and from there on. Once I heard that when I was hosting Law and Crime, I was like, I'm done with this. I can't believe this case.
Yeah, we thought they were kidding.
Yeah, the leaf blower is a big question mark, because you end up blowing stuff from. You could have been blowing it from 5 feet away. You could be blowing it into your scene. You can further contaminate the scene at that point. But here is the other issue that I have with that, right? So the paper bags, the Stop and Shop bags, I can understand it looks bad. It's not the end of the world if you use it. As long as it was paper and you put something, if you have biological fluids in it, if you ran to like when in the city, if you had to run to a bodega and get a brown paper bag, that's fine. But here's the problem: putting blood evidence or any biological fluids in an open container and then putting it in there, that's a big problem. It's as simple as that. There's no other way to describe that other than that's a big problem.
Okay. So we do have sui generis just wants to make a point, and I'm covering Joe up when I put sui generis on. This is not good. I don't know how we can correct that. So we can
That's
even
all right.
wait a while.
We can save everybody that.
The officer was. I'm going to do it quickly. Was the first time doing first trial where I laughed out loud. Snowblower, but he got a promotion and retired. To the disgrace, listen to us who watched from the pre-trial to now, truth will prevail. So we generous is like, no one can believe it, Joe. No one can believe that we heard that, and the red solo cups, and everyone's singing red solo cups and all,
And I heard, Joe, today, I'd heard it before in, general terms, but I forgot they put the open solo cups in the bag. They have no
Yes.
tops on them. They're turning quickly from snow to liquid, with blood suspended in there somewhere, sloshing around. I mean, what's the thought process when you're collecting this evidence and thinking this is good, this will be fine?
Yeah, well, I can understand that in 2023, whenever this really kicked off, that any police department doesn't have the evidence collection kits to be able to do these things, whether it's paper. But listen, we know that Canton isn't a hotbed for homicide activity, and you have to have all of this, stacks and stacks of these things. But for crying out loud, any biological fluids, we learned very long time ago, we're talking 25 years plus, that it must go into a paper bag. Simple as that. And you have to have a special container if you're going to have the actual substance. And in this case, they had the snow with it, that it has to be covered. I mean, this is kind of investigative 101, and the fact that that this police department doesn't have it or didn't have enough of these things is kind of like a question mark. And I've said this a long time ago. This is an executive problem. This is an executive problem. The person in charge of the department is the one responsible to make sure that they have spending enough money on the tools that the cops, and in this case, the detectives and the detective sergeants and lieutenants need in case you do have something. Because if you don't, this is what you look like when it's all said and done.
So Joe, he went back. I'm sorry, Michael.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, he went back to his department and picked up his own tent so that he could put a tent over everything because the snow was coming down. But that tent never was utilized. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I guess they figured at that point the snow had already come down enough that they didn't. It didn't matter at this point. I don't know what I can't get into his head at this stage, but we do know that tents in many police departments, so especially down south, when they have especially like Florida, when you have these sudden thunderstorms that could roll in, they have them in their cars. so that when there's a crime scene, they could pop these things up quickly. So if you're up north and you have the chance of having snowstorms and blizzards and stuff like that, then somebody, at least one car, probably a supervisor's car, should have all of this stuff in it so that he or she, whoever the supervisor is, can drive to the scene and have everything there. Because the question also I've been asking too is, where was the patrol supervisor during all this thing, especially when the first cop shows up? Because I'll tell you, if this guy would have been working in New York City and handled the scene like that, whatever, he'd been walking a footpost on the Brooklyn Bridge, in the middle of January. I mean, that's basically what you would be dealing with at that point.
Yeah,
And
that's
I'm
true.
not trying to sound cruel or I know everything, but I could tell you something, that there are certain things that we teach our cops and you learn very quick, like securing the scene, keeping people separated. I mean, those are all kind of 101 police patrol tactics.
Oh, you just mentioned something. Thank you, Sui Generous, for doing an important job bringing people like Joe on so you can see. Keep people separated. Now, this is not in this testimony today, but as you know, the judge
It's coming. Yeah.
We've heard some of it. Yeah.
It's coming in terms of how everyone got together and talked before they were interviewed. And I said to Michael Bryan, I said, the thought came to me, a stupid, simple thought this weekend. It's like the judge wants sequestration, the prosecution wants sequestration of witnesses. Why do they want that? Because they don't want them to get their story straight, right? Isn't that crime scene 101 too, that you separate people when you talk to them? Before you talk to them, you don't have them get the story straight?
That's the first thing. I mean, you're dealing with a death at this point. You treat every death as if it's suspicious until proven otherwise. And most people are harmed by someone they know. So if you're the patrol officer on there, these are the things that should be running through your head, and separating the people so that they can't talk and say, "Hey, this is what I heard or what you heard." You know, we were all kids. We play the telephone game, right? You'd say something, by the time it gets to the 10th person, it's something totally different. But in a weather storm that you're having too, it's easier. You can separate people by putting them in the back of police cars at that point. Say, you go sit in this car, you go sit in that car, you go sit in that car. And then this way, you as the police officer can think clearly on how to get this scene secured. And that was something that just never happened.
Yeah, I was going to say that they learned apparently from this. One of my first thoughts was, why don't they have like a little mini CSI kit in every squad car? Just the basics. Guess what they're going to get now? As a result of the audit, they now are putting those in every squad car so that this kind
Go
of thing
figure.
won't happen again. But it's too bad something like this has to happen for them to think the basics.
Well,
But doesn't I'm sorry, Joe, go ahead.
No, sir. Yeah, no. At least, like, so, for instance, in New York City, it gets expensive if you had to put one of these kits in every car because you have so many cars and so many cops. So you usually stuff the sergeant's car with all of that stuff. So because we have a sergeant on patrol 24 hours a day, he or she is there. You have a sergeant that's working that detail, working that patrol precinct or whatever it may be. I'm still waiting to see, like, how long the sergeant comes to come to the scene, the patrol sergeant, to try to take control over what happens here and get other people there so that you can say you had a secured and established crime scene. But they can't say that.
What about documenting where you found that glass that we started out with that he pulled out, that partial, liquor alcohol glass? What about documenting where that, shouldn't that have been documented exactly how it was found, where it was found, especially in relation to the body?
Yeah, well, yeah, right. You guys know the Latin in situ, right? In place, that you have to. So, for instance, if I'm Gallagher and I find the broken tail light pieces and I call over Lang, come over here and take a look at it. It should have been photographed as is in place, then photographed with a ruler so that you can get the exact size before it's moved, before you touch it. Because evidence dynamics is a big problem, as we know, in any case. And evidence dynamics is simply, as soon as, basically everything gets contaminated as soon as you enter a scene. So you're going to expect certain things to get happen. But once you move it, you can never put it back in its original place. There you had it. So you could have blown it with the snow blower and this and that. That's why I kind of question the whole snow blower thing. You have a little piece of plastic that could have been 10 feet in the street and could have got blown over. Who knows? Or it could have been moved by a plow. I mean, all these different things that I think that we're going to hear from the defense about how these pieces of taillight actually get onto the lawn is going to be something that we're going to say that's a possibility. Because remember, right? Beyond a reasonable doubt, that's all he has to do.
Oh, yeah.
It is funny that we have, in O.J. Simpson, we had Investigator Lang, remember? And in this case, we have Investigator Lank. I mean, I don't know if it's this like karma crossover, but here we are, how many years later, talking about the same stuff.
Yeah,
Yep,
and
unfortunately.
I always tell people if I had hair, I'd pull it out. When I watch some of these things because for years, I mean, I also did a lot of training for the police department in New York City, and I've done it elsewhere. And you're trying to just get this, document. If it's not documented, it wasn't done. I mean, you kind of just trying to keep on hammering these things home. And we do teach our police officers, not as much as I would like to see throughout the country, but how to deal with crime scenes. Because you know what? The prevailing thought from most executives in the country is going to be, well, their job, that's not their job, that's the detective's job. But they've done studies on this going back to the 70s. The first officer on the scene often makes or breaks a case. Whatever he or she does, what they don't do is probably the most damaging of all things. And I think we're seeing that right here.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note that Gallagher never saw John O'Keefe's body at the scene. So he's relying on he said to he said to he said to even for that fundamental piece of information. So when Linda, you talk about, well, where did the glass show up in relation to his body? Gallagher doesn't know because he wasn't even there. So in a vacuum, the glass doesn't help him that much. Where was it? Who knows? Could have been from somebody else dropping it in the front yard. Who knows?
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong. I believe he testified today, Gallagher, that Lank didn't see it where the body was either, and he's telling him where the body was.
Yeah,
So
and Proctor in the loop as well, also not having seen where the body was.
right, so this is all of a problem because, um, you know, even the cop who saw it, I mean, it was pitch black, it was snowing like crazy. Here's my take on that part of it. If I'm so as a sergeant, I get paid to make sometimes tough decisions, or sometimes decisions that aren't going to go over very well. Well, to me, I would have went with, we're going to hold this scene until the daylight. We're not touching anything. Of course, you know, victims always first, right? You always help the victim first. That's the whole thing. I mean, that kind of gets screwy too because EMS comes in and it's once again evidence dynamics. But you have to render aid. That's always rule number one. Render aid. But for the rest of the scene, it should have been held. Even the lieutenant admitted it, and I don't think people really kind of weigh in on it. But when he said, "We didn't know we had a homicide," exactly, you didn't know, so that means you should have held the scene. You should have treated that scene should have been treated as if it was a homicide until proven otherwise. Meaning, let's wait till the daytime comes, then we can get all the people here who couldn't get here in the middle of the night during the snowstorm. Right, because apparently if I remember correctly, the state police crime scene team couldn't make it there, or couldn't get there, or they weren't available. So all right, we'll hold the scene until you can get here, and
Yeah.
then we're gonna have you guys process the scene because that's what your job is supposed to be.
But
And
Joe,
then
the crime scene tape wouldn't stay in place. It was so windy. They couldn't, so they decided, the hell with it. And then they don't even park a squad there to just keep eyes on the location.
I
Nothing.
know there's a lot of supervision problems here, and then that's the bottom line. You can blame the cops so much, but in the end of the day, the supervisors are the one responsible to make sure this all gets taken care of. And listen, I made mistakes as a supervisor, and you learn from them. You just hope that it's not so damaging that you have to be in court one day trying to explain to everybody why you did what you didn't do, or why'd you do what you do, and why didn't you do this? Because I'll tell you, you can. This is the kind of stuff that would give supervisors nightmares out there on a case like this, because you say to yourself, if a woulda, coulda, shoulda, and I always followed up with didn't. You didn't. And
Yeah.
and that's something that you can't do. There are no do-overs. This isn't a playground where you can say, okay, let's try this again. Doesn't work that way in crime scene investigation.
And before we get back to running the tape, there's another additional issue that we'll probably get to next week, or maybe when the defense goes, is that by that morning they had Trooper Proctor, who was a state police investigator, now fired Trooper Proctor, right? It was the head of the crime. It was head of this investigation. He was confronted with a medical examiner who wouldn't determine that this was a homicide, and within 16 hours he's on the phone, calling her some kind of nut job, the medical examiner. Because she won't say this is a homicide. So, even if they had treated this as a homicide, at least it would be, I guess it would be subject for later on determination, even though they're going against a medical examiner.
Yeah,
How
I
do you
mean,
deal
listen,
with that?
but we've always had it. You always have some issue with something at some point. But the medical examiner, even though you're not on the same team, so to speak, right? The medical examiner isn't there to help you solve your case. The medical examiner is there to find out medically what happened to this individual. And they only give, as you know, Linda, I'm talking to the choir over here, but
I'm
the
married to a
court,
former medical
yeah,
examiner, now forensic pathologist.
right. Yeah, you're only you only get from them the cause of death and manner of death. Other than that, they have nothing to do with your investigation. And if they mark something undetermined and they kick it back to you, well, now it's on me. I have to find out more evidence, and I need to work the scene, and I need to work, the case more, and try to get that out there. So to say that, and you have to work together, so you want to have a good relationship. But I don't ever remember anybody that I worked with, whatever, having a bad thing to say about the medical examiner in regards to this. I remember you could say like, "Oh my God, it's undetermined. We got a lot more work to do." But other than that, we're not going to call her up and try to call him or her up and try to bully them. I mean, that doesn't work.
Yeah, it definitely hurts the confirmation bias if you don't have if you don't have
Well,
a
the
determination.
relationship is, to me, is more important in that respect, right? I mean, the relationship, in order that you need to have that good relationship working together. And listen, sometimes you're going to win, and sometimes you're going to lose. And what I mean by that is, as the investigative unit, you're going to have to do more work, and sometimes that work might not be able to come to fruition because if it's undetermined by the medical examiner, where he or she can't tell you exactly what transpired here, and leaving it back to you. And if you didn't do a proper scene investigation and taking photographs and interviewing people and talking to them and getting their statements locked down, then you have a problem.
Yep. Shall we jump back in to see what else he's got to tell us here? Hold on just a second. Okay.
I'd love to
You
get
didn't
to
find
the
it.
bags. I know Joe says the bags are important, but I'd love to get to that cross-examination part because it really was funny, actually.
It was
Important enough to write a report yourself.
I think that's poor misrepresentation. There's a person fighting for their life. It was very important.
When you were there at the scene at what time was it, by the way?
I got there shortly after 7.
Okay, you knew that person who was fighting for his life had already been transported and was in good care, as best care we can provide at Good Samaritan Hospital, correct?
That is correct.
So certainly you're not excusing away the idea that you didn't memorialize your conduct because you were too busy fighting for someone's life. That's not what you're saying.
No, it definitely is not what I'm
Okay.
saying.
Obviously, reporting to a scene and supervising a scene is one thing, but actually gathering evidence is a whole next level. You would agree with that?
Sure.
Because, just to put a fine point on it, responding to a scene as a supervisor, you want to make sure everybody's doing their duty, but the officer or officers who, for instance, uncover, let's say it's a knife or a gun or some weapon or something like that, actually documenting and picking up that evidence and handling it up in an appropriate way, that is all highly, highly technical. It's very important to get it right and memorialize it all, correct?
That is correct.
That's why you're highly trained to memorialize and report everything that you do in that regard in a report that can later be used forensically, in other words, in a courtroom setting, to recreate as best you can with as much detail as you can exactly what you did and how you did it and where it was done, correct?
Sure. Yes.
He never asked him what kind of training he got and how long the training was, which I was kind of surprised on.
Officer Lank wrote a report in
That's
this
true.
case.
You're right. I mean, we didn't hear that, right?
Did Officer Mulaney?
That's-
I believe he did, yes.
Did Officer Seraph?
Yes.
Officer Good? Sergeant
Yes.
Good?
Yes,
But you did not.
I did not.
Sergeant Good, I think, was the patrol sergeant.
Who was the first officer to find any potential physical evidence at the scene, be it blood or glass?
I can't answer that. It was not me. I was not the first thing that was spotted was the pink spotting, not the glass.
Okay. Who was the first person to see the glass?
I think it was myself as I uncovered it with the leaf blower.
One of the important things that we've talked about, Mr. Gallagher, is documenting the details of evidence recovery, not just the fact that something was recovered, correct?
That's correct.
So you'd want to know what time of day it was recovered, correct?
Sure.
You'd want to know who was there and who was around when it was recovered, correct?
Yes.
You'd want to know what the item is, the condition of the item, right?
Yes.
You'd also want to know exactly where it's recovered, correct?
Yes.
In other words, as best you can to pinpoint the exact location where an item was found. That could play a huge role in any investigation, be it criminal or otherwise.
It could. It could.
Did you diagram or draw a diagram back at Canton PD or
I did
out
not.
at the scene
No.
about where that glass was found?
No, I did no reports or diagrams.
Let's just
Did you
reinforce
diagram
that.
exactly where?
Let's just reinforce that. Where the no doesn't know. He thinks he's the first person who saw the glass, but actually, when you hear that, you're not really sure. He's not sure who saw what. Joe, I'm sorry, but my mind is being blown here, and I have to tell you, Missy, could you put us in the 3 box for a second?
Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, if we can get in the
There
3.
you
I
go.
just want to show you because this is a really. I have 2 words. Do it. Free Karen Reed, justice for John O'Keefe. Same thing. Thank you for doing this. Nurse Kim was in the court today, and she said the jurors really pay attention with Alan Jackson is up, not so much with Hank Brennan. If you're watching this, and I know, and you and I both know, Joe, that supervisors sometimes, well, he's now retired, but watch their employees testify to see how much better they can be or how much better they can get. Is he testifying properly, or is it the quality of the testimony or the quality of the investigation, or both?
Well, one thing that we were always told too when you're testifying in court, avoid making faces and you watch a nonverbal language because the jury picks up on those things. So when he's going, making faces like that, I'm sitting there feeling sorry for him because he's in a bad spot. But you have to be really mindful. I mean, the jurors are watching this, and also you could give out clues to the defense attorney when he's asking you questions in regards to what things are hitting home and what's not. So when you could see when he was talking about, well, I found it, whatever, he kind of makes that grimace on his face, and or shaking his head no before the question's even finished asking. It's really important because if the jury doesn't like you, right, that's another big strike against you. And if they're listening to this and thinking that you're incompetent too, because quite frankly, this is about competency in regards to what the police did, and we know that there are a lot of issues with how the police handled this. I mean, I can't wait till they bring back the trooper. I think it was Trooper Paul in his accident reconstruction. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
If
oh
they
my
d-
gosh, yeah,
they'd
that's
be
gonna be.
insane. They'd be insane.
That's I mean the defense, right? I mean the defense could call him and
Yeah.
and bring him back there, and the defense could bring in Proctor too, if I'm
Oh, I
they
expect
will.
that. Yeah.
Oh,
In
absolutely.
fact,
Well, and listen, I'm not a lawyer, but I'd be bringing in Trooper Paul too, because I think it's important that everyone hears how the vehicle accident reconstruction was done.
it's a parade of
Correct me if
idiots.
I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm
No,
wrong.
no, thank you wrong. So generous. Thank you, my hero. Linda was telling it like it is. That's Joe Giacalone telling it like it is. I'm learning from him. God bless you and thanks, and keep on with the truth. And I mean, she means it for you. You actually teach me, Joe. I heard something. Evidence. What was that? Dynamics. I actually heard
Evidence
that.
dynamics, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
for the first
basically
time.
things that you don't have control over, right?
Okay.
So if you just think of it, the simplest way is patrol cops get sent to a house, the door is open and they walk in and it's pitch black and they put their flashlight on and realize that they're standing in blood, right? It wasn't intentional, it was by accident. So that's evidence dynamics, something you didn't have control over. Or EMS comes in and they mess up your scene, right? We used to joke and call EMTs evidence mangling technicians, right? So, but it's part of the game, right? It's just part of your investigation, but I need to explain it. As the detectives have to be able to explain that. And something I think Jackson should have followed up with a question when he was talking about about the documentation and that he didn't do it, that it basically uh did Gallagher sign off on it, right? So meaning, did someone say I did something and then I signed off on it, right? I mean, to me, that's another important aspect I think that he missed out on at this point, because if he can get Gallagher to admit that he signed off on this entire investigative report about what happened there, I think he can seal the deal in the respect that the supervisor who was acting as a detective didn't properly document something that he found that becomes a crucial part of the case, and then signed off on something that somebody else wrote saying that he did something. I think that's a bigger issue as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
And
he
Joe
may
proves
get
my
to that.
point as to why you need to have your own police procedures expert, which the defense probably does. Take a look at everything, because they can advise you as the lawyer, because you as a lawyer can never know enough. I can never know enough about a crime scene as Joe does and how to collect evidence. So I have to learn from someone like Joe. And hopefully the police learn from someone like Joe too. But it's very important to have your own expert educate you.
Well, and I think the biggest takeaway here for police departments is detective lieutenants, let your detectives, like I was told, let your investigators do their jobs. Do not get involved in the actual doing of it, because this is what could happen.
Yeah, we think, Michael Easter was going to be the expert for the defense on how bad this was being investigated, but that was denied by the judge. So now we have Alan Jackson basically bringing out all of those things as part of his cross-examination, right? So I don't know what else he can do if he doesn't have the expert in his pocket, except use that expert outside of court to help present, the cross-examination to kind of fill in those gaps. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and like I said, if I was Jackson, I would have brought in the investigative manual if they have one, right? So I
Right.
would have had the training that they went to. I would have had their lesson plans. I would have had all these things, because I probably would, look at it and say, well, anywhere in this document, I don't see anywhere here where the supervisor is doing this. Like, why did you get involved in this? Or this was supposed to happen according to this manual, and I haven't heard that. I don't know if they
Got them.
skipped
They
it.
had them. They had them because when he was telling the judge that Easter was qualified, he said not only was he teaching the FBI, but that he had reviewed all the manuals that the police, the state police, and the Canton had to operate under. So somebody has them, but the judge is not letting them come in through their expert. But I think they could come in through someone like him in terms of the specifics. I would think.
Yeah.
Well, I think how do they not? I mean, this is something that I know in New York City we took a lot of effort and pride to make sure that our lesson plans were correct, because the chances of getting them subpoenaed in a case was always pretty high. Because if you can't attack the evidence, right, you have to attack the case. And if you can't attack the case, you go after the investigators. I mean, it's a kind of simple process. And you as the police department have to make sure that you did exactly what you're supposed to do and build the prosecutable case, hand it over to the prosecutor so that he or she can say, okay, this is good. But there seems to be a lot of not asking questions. I think even from the prosecutor point in the beginning of this with I think it was Lally in the first round, whatever. It's because I think he was surprised about some of the answers that he got, as well as everybody else. When he had the people on the stand, which was not really that good.
I would hope when Jackson continues his cross, as he will tomorrow, that he builds towards some of that manual stuff, because we know that Gallagher's reason for using the leaf blower was I'd seen it before. I'd seen it before somewhere, but he never really got specific about it. So I'm hoping that Jackson's kind of, because that people just latch on to the solo cups and the leaf blower. Maybe beyond what they should, but they do, right?
Well, you and I latched onto it right away, Michael,
because
right?
it sounds so ludicrous. So I would hope that he circles back, and that's what the final thrust is with the cross-examination. Well, show me in your manual exactly where that fits into the mix.
Well, I don't know if I would do that, because then you're going to say, well, the audit said it was innovative. But Debbie J points out, I just can't with Gallagher saying it was a smart thinking using a leaf blower. Bias, Bev, she told my Judge Canoni, not allowing a police expert to testify to the improper police procedure. Love you guys. And she means you too, Jeff. She means you too,
Well, I mean, listen, we know they're not going to wait to the spring, right? Till everything, melts in order to look for it. I mean, I understand that. But, was there a better thing that you could have done? Whatever. I guess we can Monday morning quarterback this. Let's put it this way: the leaf blower would have been up my list of things to do. Just
somebody said,
but
where'd they see that before? Reno 911. Remember that show? Yeah, I was thinking of the Nielsen comedies. What were they called? Police Squad, Police something.
Police Squad, yeah.
Police Squad series of movies. That's where you see that stuff. It just seems it's a comedy. Unfortunately, this was real life.
Yeah. What else?
Okay.
I know we got some good stuff coming up still on the cross.
Let's find out, shall we? Let's see what we got here. Come on, get on there, you little bug. There we go. Uh-oh, I got rid of us. So there we are. We're back.
You recovered the blood spots that you did recover.
No.
Did you at least, if you did write a report, did you at least take notes on a pad about what you were doing?
Yeah, conditions weren't It was pretty hard to take notes at that time, but I did not take notes, no.
At some point, you mentioned a person by the name of Tom Kelleher, Deputy Chief Kelleher.
That's correct.
Who is Deputy Chief Kelleher?
He's the deputy chief of Canton Police.
He was active on active duty at the time? When I say active duty, I don't mean that morning, that hour. I mean just generally.
Yes, he was a lieutenant at that time.
He was someone to whom, as a matter of fact, probably the only person to whom at Canton PD you actually reported, correct? Up the chain of command. He was the only person to whom you reported up the chain of command, meaning he was your direct report.
He was in charge of detectives at that time.
And
yes.
then, of course, the chief would be above him, correct?
Deputy chief and chief.
Okay. When you responded to the scene, Deputy Chief Kelleher did not come out of his house and take over the investigation, correct?
Correct.
That was yours to detail,
That is correct.
at least while you were there.
That is correct.
So can you describe what you did to preserve the crime scene? I'm sorry, to preserve the scene, because at that time you said you did not know if it was a crime scene. Is that right?
That's correct.
What did you do in
I mean,
terms of actually preserving the scene for later investigation? What steps did you take?
For later, can you explain later investigation?
So let me take a step back.
Sure.
Have you been trained to preserve scenes?
Yes.
Okay. What's the reason that you would want to preserve a scene? What does that mean?
Collect evidence.
Collect evidence and make sure nothing is disturbed, correct?
Correct.
Civilians can't kind of traipse through or walk through evidence, correct?
That's correct.
You've heard the phrase forensically, evidence in, evidence out. Someone traipses through a crime scene, you bring
Correct.
evidence with you, and you take it back out with you on your shoes or on your feet or your breath or your saliva, whatever it might be.
Very familiar with that, yes.
Preserving the scene is best efforts, it's best practices to make sure that nothing is moved, touched, messed with in any way, correct?
That's correct, and that's what was done here.
What did you do? That's my question. What did you do to preserve that scene?
There were no civilians ever to trample through. Were rescue efforts made on Mr. O'Keefe? Yes, that's priority. So rescue workers do go into any type of scene. Medical life-saving measures come first. Once all apparatus was off scene, the original officers put out crime scene tape to mark an area. And later, it was documented, it was photographed, and evidence was collected.
And it was searched by you, at least initially with the leaf blower.
Correct.
Okay. So you were interested in the area that, by the way, I want to clear this up, make sure I'm not mistaken. You described for Mr. Brennan basically where Mr. O'Keefe's body was, correct?
Yes, yes,
You never saw his body in situ. You never saw his body in place.
that is correct.
You were told by Sergeant Lank generally where his body was, correct?
Yes, and Sergeant Lank actually never saw Mr. O'Keefe either.
That's my next question.
Okay.
Sergeant Lank-
And
Anyone?
Mr. Good, and Sergeant Good as well.
Right. Sergeant Lank never saw John O'Keefe actually in place, correct?
That is correct.
So you're
This is your
receiving
point, Joe,
information
that
from
no
Sergeant
one,
Lank
that other people
that
were
he
telling
did not
him.
have personal knowledge of, and then you're providing that information later to crime scene investigators who are trying to establish a diagram or some sort of a chart about where that evidence was, where the drinking glass was, where his body was, correct?
No, I never spoke to anybody in that manner about that.
Didn't you ultimately go out to the scene along with others at Massachusetts State Police when they had a drone overhead?
No, you're mistaken. I can clarify it for you if you wish.
Sure.
So on February 1st, after the execution of the warrant, they wanted to go down to the scene. It was Trooper Proctor and somebody from the CARS team, I'm not sure of the name. Once they got down there, I did show them where I was shown John O'Keefe was. They did want to put up a drone, but they could not do it because they were too close to Norwood Airport and because of FAA regulations. And that was the last of my involvement with that. I hope that clarifies things for you.
Forget the drone. I'm interested in the first part, which was you accompanied Trooper Proctor to the
Correct.
scene, correct?
Correct.
There were other members of cars, CARS.
I think there was one. Crash accident reconstruction section, I'm assuming.
Okay, so it's a forensic, a member of MSP who does forensic diagrams, correct?
I would say. I don't know if they do diagrams. I don't know what they do.
Or reconstruction of some sort.
Sure, reconstruction of some sort.
So you were there to help provide information about where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found, correct?
And be a Canton police officer present in case any neighbors had come out.
So you were there to help provide information about, or at least you did provide information to them about where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found.
Oh, sure, yes.
Except you didn't see Mr. O'Keefe's body, did you?
No, I did not.
So that was a guess on your part.
It was what I was shown. It's the information I had.
Yeah, it was the information you were told by Sergeant Lang, correct?
Yes.
Who also didn't see John O'Keefe in place on the ground at 3450, correct?
That is correct, yes.
So his would be a guess also, correct?
Well, we're going backwards. So he was told by Sergeant Good and et cetera. So it was information passed along, which is what police officers do.
Right.
Okay, can we stop it right there, Michael?
Yes,
Well,
because
that's
I
the
lost track of the chain of all of the stories
I
being
did
told.
too. Joe, did you lose track? We're going backwards, and this was passed by this,
Yeah.
and this was passed by this, and it's several days later, and then we get
Well, we would have kept Sergeant Good for as long as we needed him.
okay.
I'm assuming it's a him. I can't remember for sure,
It is a
but
him, yeah.
I believe it's a him. Meaning this: if he's the sergeant or the cop that found the body, whoever saw this body, he or she is staying until until this whole thing is, so you could say without a, it was right here. The body was right here, and to pass that information along is if they're trying to save money for the overtime, boy, that was not a good move.
Let me ask you a
so
follow-up question for somebody on the scene, okay? Michael Bryan sat all afternoon, and I was listening, and he said all afternoon about people saying that Karen Reed supposedly in this trial has been, no one wrote in the reports. I hit him, and then that was I hit him, and then there was an I hit him, and then there was an I hit him today. If somebody confesses or makes any type of statements, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? I hit him. Shouldn't that be in a report?
spontaneous utterances are a gift. And you know what? Because you don't have to worry about you were questioning this person without their Miranda or whatever else, if they were a quote unquote suspect, which in this case it really wasn't, because the cops in their defense had no idea what was actually transpired here. All you had was a dead body, and you didn't know if it was any foul play or any crime that was involved in this. So the deal is, if somebody's making a spontaneous utterance, yeah, we always tell the cops, write it at least in your memo book, right? So the cops have a memo book with them. And you write this stuff down. I know we're probably getting into the electronic age where things are done with a maybe a mini iPad or something. Who knows what they're doing these days? But every investigator should have that notepad with them, so you can write these things down. I mean, how do you know who you spoke to? How do you know how do you get in contact with this person if you ever need to speak to them again? How about the scene investigator, the detective that's in charge of the scene? He or she is responsible for drawing the rough draft of the actual scene. And, of course, it's not, you don't have to be Picasso, but you're supposed to draw it in your notebook. And then once you leave, you're not supposed to touch it. The rough sketch is something that the cops do, the investigator does. The smooth sketch, was what we call, is what's done in with a computer. Maybe it's a CAD drawing, maybe it's something that's sophisticated and that kind of thing. That's going to get done probably by the state police in a situation like this. But to me, like, this is just some of the basic stuff that should have been taken care of, and unfortunately we're here talking about this, and we really shouldn't be, because some of this stuff is basic stuff.
Hey,
right,
Joe, I
so-
know we
go ahead.
said we'd keep you for an hour. Are you okay to hang for a little bit?
Yeah, I can hang out for a little bit.
I don't want to wear out my Joe welcome. So
Oh, everyone loves you. I mean, obviously, Joe, we don't want to do anything. But you had a statement: if it wasn't documented, it wasn't done. That's a mantra. How about if it wasn't documented, it wasn't said? Could that also be a mantra?
Oh, absolutely. Same thing. I mean, it becomes a he said, she said, and everybody now has to if somebody says something like I would have written it right down, right in my book. Like even if you gave out a traffic summons and somebody said, "Well, I didn't know that you can't make a right on red," writing that immediate statement in your notepad, whatever. So if you got to go to court and then testify and say, "Oh yeah, as a matter of fact, Sam Smith said he didn't know you couldn't make a right on red in New York City." So I mean, those little things go a long way because it's difficult to go back into a memo book, especially when things are in chronological order. They may be able to, fit something in which the defense might allege at that point, but it's written right there in chronological order. It becomes really difficult. And I'm gonna say it doesn't have to happen right that second, but when things calm down, as I said, separate your people, get them all in cars so that you can actually think. One thing that Jackson should have asked him when he said, well, because Gallagher said that they put up crime scene tape. Did a police officer stay the entire time in a radio car there until the daylight came? Did he or she leave? Did they have to go to the bathroom? I mean, like what? How long did this person stay there? Was there a person there the entire time? Probably, and I'm hoping there was, but I think that Jackson could
No.
have gone. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, there wasn't, and I think we're going to learn that eventually. That the crime scene tape, as I mentioned, was blowing away, so they gave up on that. But then there's no evidence that there was a car parked there for the night. I mean, it really wasn't even going to be that long because it was almost daylight already. So
Yeah, it was
I
at
think
5:30 in the morning when this thing was.
well,
kicking
yeah,
off or
he got
something?
there. He didn't get there till 7. So it's already even in the middle of winter there. You got another hour and the sun's coming up. So anyway, I think we're going to learn that through Jackson's continued cross-examination tomorrow. Let's see what else we got on this from today.
Who was helping the reconstructionist establish the formal report, and the CARS report was an officer who not only didn't see where John O'Keefe's body
There was a little
was,
foreshadowing
he got
there about the
information
accident
about
reconstructionist.
the body from someone who didn't see it either. Correct? Can we at least agree on
No,
that?
you have to go back to the beginning. I didn't understand the beginning of that question.
Sure,
It was very
I'll try it
long.
again.
By the way, Jackson,
The
when you
point
can't
is,
hear him, is because he
Mr.
walked
Gallagher-
away from the mic.
Yes, he's not doing. He's not performing well for us. He's working off the mic, and so we're lucky to get what we're getting. He's so far away.
You happen to be tapped as the person who is going to assist the CARS folks, the MSP, in creating their CARS,
No.
ultimately their CARS report.
No.
Isn't it true that you accompanied Trooper Proctor and members of the CARS unit to document Fairview Road and the scene of the incident?
Yeah, I thought I explained it could not be done.
Okay.
So
I'm not
I
asking
wasn't,
you-
I only went to show them where Mr. O'Keefe was and in case any neighbors came out. I wasn't there to assist in any documentation at all.
You were there.
Well, by telling them where the body was, that's helping them with the documentation, no?
You would think, right?
I have not. You showed me one section of it.
And if you notice too, he was answering no before he was even finishing. Those things
He does a
reverberate
lot
with
of
the jury.
this.
And the faces too, right? See, there it is.
That.
I didn't finish the question.
No.
I got that part wrong. You accompanied Trooper Proctor?
No, what's wrong is I was interviewed by Lieutenant Tully. That was a meeting I had with Prosecutor Lally.
Okay.
Trooper Tully was present. Trooper Tully never asked me any question. I don't recall Trooper Tully ever asking me a question, sir.
So let me be a little bit more defined. So in Trooper Tully's report, where he reports what you said, you were actually talking to Adam Lally, my colleague sitting up in front.
Correct.
Okay. So now we've got that cleared up. Let me ask you again. Did you say in front of Trooper Tully that you accompanied Trooper Proctor and members of the CARS unit to document Fairview Road?
Meening, they were documenting Fairview Road. It's not clear.
But he was
The
saying
report's
yes
not clear.
before he was even
They
finishing.
were
You better be
going to
careful
document
doing that.
Yeah. He's.
He was going like this before, and then all of a sudden he stopped when he realized that wasn't what he wanted to hear. I said, I mean, that's a bad move because if I'm Jackson, I'm picking up on that. I'm going to set him up on a question while he's doing this.
Yeah. You can just modify your question so that he looks like an idiot. And the others that he does not agree with, he's immediately halfway through the question, he's whipping his head back and forth.
Fairview Road,
Right.
not me.
So you just said something that I want to follow up on.
Okay,
The report's not clear, correct?
that's correct.
So that's an inaccurate report.
I wouldn't call it inaccurate at all. I'm just saying you're misinterpreting the wording.
I see. And I'm misinterpreting it even though I just read it directly from the report?
Yeah, sometimes sentences have different meanings. Yes, you are.
Okay.
Clear, concise,
reality is
correct.
you did
3
end up going
C's
to
in
the
report
scene,
writing.
correct?
I
did.
What was
And your
that?
company-
Yeah, what was that again?
Jeff, what was
In
that?
the police, in the police department, we teach the 3 C's: clear, concise, and correct. Those are the 3 things that you always have to make sure. And as a supervisor, you're reading these things. I mean, just a quick note. I remember when I was sitting at the desk and the cop delivers me what we call, the complaint report, and said at TPO, which stands for time, place, occurrence, victim found dead. That was the entire report. And and you just look at him and go like, that's it? That's all you got? I mean, yeah, and then you have to, I have to sign off on this stuff, right? So if I put my name on it, I am now saying that this was a good preliminary investigation, which it wasn't. So sometimes people would say, "Oh, you're a pain in the butt," because you won't sign off on certain things until I do this or do that. Yeah, because I'm going to condition you to do it right the first time, or well, I did that. Okay, but where is that? Where is that written here that you did it? Oh, I'll remember. Oh no, you won't. Just write it in the damn report.
Joe,
So
my husband has a saying. He always says that if you can't do it right on the small cases, you can't do it right on the high-profile cases. It has to be foundational.
I agree with that, and I also look at it this as I understand that they might not have had a lot of experience with these kinds of cases, which is understandable. But when you have one, make sure you do what you're supposed to do. I mean, this training is open to everybody. You could do your own, research and your own things on it. I would really like to know what the training was. Like, how many hours did you go? Was it a 40-hour course? Was it a 125-hour course? I mean, when you're talking about crime scene stuff, I think, if I recall correctly, the New York City crime scene class for the individual that go through, I think it's 120 something hours. So you're looking at like a 4-year degree, I think, almost, when you come down to it, that kind of, credit wise, you're dealing with and then you're also doing on the job training. I don't know. I mean, I never went through that course, but I still went through the mini versions of these things, because as a supervisor, I'm not the guy that's supposed to be doing this. I just have to know what the investigator was supposed to do. So, did you take the photos? Did you do this? Did you do that? That's what my job is, and that's what his job was. Not to be going out there and, raking the leaves.
Saving measures wouldn't be appropriate.
There's no video specifically.
They wouldn't take video of somebody undergoing
there's
life-saving measurements.
There's no body cam.
We don't have body cameras.
There's no
They
dash
do now.
cam that shows it.
Well, dash cameras would be on the road. Mr. O'Keefe was approximately 8 to 10 feet off the road.
Well, hang on a
What's
second.
this?
You're not sure where Mr. O'Keefe was because you never saw him.
That's why I used a range, yes.
Right. So you don't know-
I know where the blood was. I know where the glass was.
Right. If you don't know if he was 7 to 9 feet off. if he
That's
was
correct.
4 to 12 feet off. You can't say.
I could, only approximately. You are correct, yes.
He could have tripped them up too and asked them, was that the same place as the part of impact, right? Wherever that they were alleged to. I mean,
meet with Officer Seraph. You met with all the officers when you arrived at the scene, correct?
Yes,
And Officer Seraph had been there from the beginning of the morning.
yes.
Officer Seraph didn't report to you at that time any statements attributable to my client, did he?
He did not know.
You later went back to 34 Fairview with Sergeant Lank,
That's correct.
and you rode back. Did you ride back to Canton PD with Sergeant Lank or separate cruisers?
Which time? I
I'm
apologize.
sorry. That's a vague question on my part. You went back to 34 Fairview with just Officer Lank, and you described a circumstance in which you went in, you were let in by Brian Albert. He went to the kitchen. You were in the family room or some other place.
Right by the kitchen, yeah.
Right by the
room
kitchen.
off the kitchen, yes.
Okay, so right next to where he was interviewing.
That's correct.
Jennifer McCabe.
Yes.
Did you ride back from that meeting with, or that event, to Canton PD with Sergeant Lank?
Yes.
And Sergeant Lank didn't say anything to you about his interview with Jennifer McCabe at that time.
I don't recall our conversation on the way back.
Okay. And you didn't write a report about any conversation that you had with Officer Seraph. You didn't write a report about any conversation you had with Sergeant Lank.
No, they're responsible for writing their own reports.
Got it.
yeah, that wasn't his job at that point.
Yeah, let me ask you this question, Joe, because I found this odd, but now I'm starting to look at everything they do as somehow odd. They go back. this guy and Lank go back to meet with Jennifer McCabe, but Lank is the only one that talks to her. He's not in the same room. He doesn't even, he's talking to somebody else. Small talk, I think is how he describes it. And so you have Jen McCabe and her favorite officer, Lank, who she's been using apparently as a conduit. Is that odd to you that they would both go there, but only one would talk to the witness?
Well, we always did it in pairs, and the rule was the lead investigator asked the questions, and we always used to kid that the other person that you're with is like children; they're seen but not heard. So you don't ask questions, you don't interrupt, you just sit there and you wait. If you have something that you want to follow up, you wait for the person who's asking the questions to finish, and then if you have a good relationship and you have a good working relationship, the person should turn to them and say, "Do you have any follow-ups, or do you have anything to signal that I'm done with asking questions, that I'm out of bullets, so to speak? Your turn." But the idea is, when you're in somebody's house, and you have to be mindful that you can't try to dictate what people do in their own houses, right? That's something that's a bad move per se, but just from a tactical perspective, you should be together and having the person, so that you can watch both ways coming, like, so one's looking this way, one's looking the other way. You're always should be thinking of your own personal safety in these things too.
Yeah, and if Lank's going to be the only one talking to her, why doesn't he just go? Does he need a taxi driver or Lieutenant Gallagher to taxi him over there? It just didn't make sense to me.
Michael, could we see if we could find because I know Joe said it didn't matter, but it was a great exchange, and it turns out the Canton Police Department can afford evidence bags. Do we know if we can find that?
Oh boy,
That's the Stop and Shop bag versus the evidence. It was towards the end of the day. I know that.
It'd be a needle in the haystack for me.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure where it would be. It may be in the last few minutes. I don't know if you remember.
You did say that let me back up and ask a different question. You testified about a year ago in another proceeding. You talked a little bit about the evidence collection of the biological material, the blood, or I'm guessing at that time, presumed blood. You haven't done any testing.
That's correct, yes, sir.
But you assumed it was blood just because of your experience, and it looked like it could be blood on the street.
That's correct.
How far were you from Canton PD, approximately?
Mile and a half.
Mile and a half. You had your cruiser with you.
I had my personal vehicle with me.
Your personal vehicle. In other words, you were ambulatory. You could get from point A to point B if you wanted to.
Yeah, I was the scene supervisor. I wasn't leaving the scene.
Okay. But you also had subordinate folks at the scene that you could have dispatched had you wanted to.
Correct.
They all had cruisers.
Yes, they did.
Or personal vehicles. I'm not sure which.
I'm sorry?
Or personal vehicles. I'm not sure which.
I was the only one with a personal vehicle. Detective Sergeant Lank had a Toyota Tundra pickup truck that is not marked, but it's assigned to our detective unit.
So if you wished to, as the ranking officer out at the scene, you could have dispatched one or more of those officers to run an errand, to go do something in furtherance of the investigation, had you wanted to.
Yeah, I actually did that.
Okay, you did. What did
Yes.
you do in that regard?
Remember, I sent Sergeant Good to get the leaf blower.
Got it. You also know that Canton PD has evidence collection bags at Canton PD.
Yes.
You also know that they have materials and tools to gather biological material, correct?
We do have swabs, yes.
And those swabs go in little containers to maintain their sanitary nature, correct?
That is correct,
In
yes.
other words, if you see a blood stain, you don't just walk up with a Kleenex that you find on the ground and wipe it up. There's your blood stain. There is a process for gathering that type of evidence, correct?
Sure. If you're looking for DNA, you can use a bloody Kleenex, to your point.
It'd be kind of an emergency.
Yeah, absolutely. My point exactly.
But if you're a mile from the Canton PD,
Yeah.
you could have gone back and gotten a swab.
Could have.
But you didn't.
Didn't
This
want
was
to.
not an emergency.
Because of the weather. Because
That was my
you just
point
said 'cause
earlier.
it's an emergency.
Didn't want to.
We
Did-
thought it was an
that's what, didn't
emergency
want
there.
to.
I mean, the storm was coming down terribly. And I believe if we didn't collect that biological matter, we weren't going to get that
That's a good
biological
point
matter.
too.
But Canton PD was a mile and a half away, 4 or 5 minutes.
In a blizzard.
Still, in a blizzard, look, it's 3 minutes in good weather, probably 4, 5, 6 minutes in a blizzard, correct?
I'm not sure.
So let's call it 12, 15 minutes. You certainly could have gone back. If you wanted to, you could have dispatched one of your officers to go back and get swabs and properly collect the blood material.
Sure. And I believed 15 minutes would have made a difference.
And what you did instead is, well, 15 minutes would have made a difference, but you asked Sergeant Good to drive to his house and get a leaf blower.
Yes, and while he was doing that, we were documenting the scene with photographs.
You could have documented the scene with photographs even if you went back and get a swab. What's the difference?
Because we were ongoing. It was ongoing. I wasn't leaving the scene.
I didn't ask you to leave the scene. I didn't ask if you were
I
leaving the scene.
needed the other officers. We talked about scene security. I already let one officer go. I now have 3 left. We're securing that scene.
So you saw pink stains in the snow, correct?
That's correct.
And you said, Officer Good, probably called him Sean, Sarge, go home and get a leaf blower. Right?
That is correct.
Could have said, Officer Mulaney, get your butt over to Canton PD and pick up 10 swabs, correct?
He wouldn't have had access to the swabs.
Oh, so now one of your officers could have gotten swabs, even if the lieutenant, a ranking lieutenant, had dispatched him to go get a swab.
Because he doesn't have access to the BCI, the Office of BCI, where our stuff is kept.
Could you have made a phone call?
No, nobody there would have had access at that time. It was only Officer Dever on the desk.
So you're the only person that could have gotten those swabs?
Sergeant Lane could have gotten them as well.
So Sergeant Lane could have too?
Sure.
But you didn't say that?
No, definitely didn't.
Okay. What you did do, however, is you went to the neighbor's house. Happened to be Tom Keller, right?
The Lieutenant of Detectives, yes.
Right. And Lieutenant Keller gave you red Solo cups.
Yes. I asked for plastic or glass containers. He had Solo cups, and I utilized them.
The same kind of Solo cups that we all see at backyard barbecues.
Yep, they hold liquid terrifically.
They're also not sealed, correct?
They are not.
They're also not used normally. I mean, they were here. They're not normally used for evidence collection, correct?
Oh, absolutely not.
But we did it anyway.
You needed to transport that.
I think you just heard Joe's excuse, but he did it anyway.
For storage and safety, right?
That's correct.
And why was it important to transport that blood material so quickly? What are the factors that you considered, the weight and balance, in terms of getting that material back to Canton PD in good condition, sanitary condition?
So a criminalist could extract a proper DNA sample.
What would happen, for instance, if that blood material, I don't know, were contaminated?
Contaminated how?
You tell me. You're the professional.
So DNA is pretty hardy, pretty forensically stable. The only things that are going to harm it are radiation, ultraviolet light, harsh chemicals such as bleach. That's not present here. I wasn't. Then you would have 2 sets of DNA when it's tested, which would benefit you.
Well, depends on whose DNA it is.
That's correct. That's correct.
Little snarky there.
Yeah.
That's it. Doesn't go over well.
While you were, I'm going to stay on this for a second. So obviously there's a reason why blood swabs or biological swabs are handled with such care. For instance, a DNA analyst is going to put on gloves.
He's shaking his head yes before he even asked the question.
I don't know about that.
Saying that he answers, I don't know about that. So that's,
Right.
It depends what they're testing.
Right.
Yeah.
But in order to go out and collect something, you'll see CSI, crime scene investigators, in full body suits when they
Sure.
walk into a crime scene.
Yeah, you can.
Because you don't want to contaminate the scene with your own hair off your arm or an eyelash falling into a blood stain, correct?
That is correct.
Right. So there are protocols. I mean, you said just a second ago, Mr. Gallagher, well, it's DNA. Unless somebody pours bleach in it, you're pretty much golden, right? That's not quite the fact, is it?
And that's not quite what I said.
No, it's not quite what you said. You were suggesting that it's hardy enough that it doesn't really matter
No.
if it's contaminated or not. If there's multiple people's DNA, it just benefits everybody.
No, I simply asked what you meant by contamination.
Okay. So it could be contaminated with debris, is that right?
Sure, it can.
It could be contaminated with other people's DNA, is that right?
It can.
It could be contaminated with foreign items, foreign either aerosols or somebody somebody's spittle when they're talking, correct?
But that's why you have elimination samples should have been as a response.
Contaminated with 1,000 things.
Hypothetically,
Right.
Hey.
Of course, these solo cups didn't have lids on them, right?
they did not.
They were open.
Yes.
You didn't photograph where you picked up the samples.
No.
You didn't document where you picked up the samples.
No.
So if the
okay, Joe.
samples were in six, how many solo cups were there?
6.
Six
Hey,
solo
bye-bye.
cups. We don't know as we sit here where each of those solo cups contents came from specifically, do we?
Specifically, no.
Okay. Then
Barely
those solo
generally.
cups with no lids were placed into a bag, right?
That's correct.
You said on direct examination that this was a brown paper bag, right?
It is. Stop and Shop, I believe.
And you said that that Stop and Shop bag is, other than having the words Stop and Shop on it versus evidence on it, basically the one and the same thing.
Same dimensions, made out of the same materials, yes.
Right. But with an evidence bag, you know exactly where it came from and who's handling it.
Not necessarily.
It comes from a manufacturer
Sure.
whose job it is to secure those bags so that they are not mishandled, so they can have some sort of bona fides that they're clean and ready to accept evidence. In, say, for instance, I don't know, the investigation of a homicide of a police officer. Important stuff, right?
We're not at a homicide of a police officer at this point.
I'm just talking about evidence bags in general. Evidence bags in general. In other words, I'm trying to think of some of the most important investigations around. The manufacturers of those evidence bags manufacture them and send them in a way so that their bona fides, the provenance of those bags, is maintained, correct, and protected.
That's the way they ship them, yes.
Right. And Kenton PD pays extra money for those bags for that very purpose.
I'm sure they do,
You
yes.
mentioned almost tongue-in-cheek, look, except for the price,
Yeah.
they're probably pretty close.
Yes.
There's a reason that there's a price difference, right?
What would the reason? What's the reason?
Well, it's not the shop, I can go pay 10 cents
Yeah.
for that bag, because I don't really give a hoot where it's been, or who's handling it. Right? It's got my milk and my eggs in it, really don't care.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they price it because of how they package it. I don't have any knowledge of
Well,
that.
you're the one that mentioned the price. I'm just
Oh,
trying to
no,
make a point.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
I'm sorry, we're speaking over each other. Okay.
I apologize.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gallagher, you gotta wait for me.
Yep.
There's a reason. My point is, there's a reason, right?
Yes.
That evidence bags are more expensive because there is a way they're manufactured and they're taken care of, and Canton PD is willing to pay that extra price, like every other law enforcement agency, because of that. Correct? All right. So they're not quite the same, are they?
No.
That's the point I wanted to get at. After all that, he's admitting that Ken PD pays more for
Those-
evidence bags because there's a reason that they're evidence bags versus the Stop and Shop.
But like, where are they? Is my question. I mean, if, and not for nothing. And I know I'll probably end up getting hate mail over this, but you don't need 3 people to secure the scene. If you want to send people to go do things, as long as you leave one person there to watch everything, that's all you should need at this point. How long is it going to take? He said 15 minutes with the snow to go back to the station house and get these. So a half hour we're talking about. Go in, get the bags, this and that. And if the sergeant was the only one to do it, then he should have been sent to go get it. It's to me that's kind of simple. I mean, if you have these tools, go get them. I mean, you're not paying for them. The taxpayer's paying for them. Get 100 of them. Who cares? Just bring them to the scene and let's do this right. Because, like I said, did they ever? Apparently, they never anticipated that they'd have to be discussing solo
Nope.
cups and the paper bags, the Stop and Shop bags. But it shouldn't happen. Let's put it that way. I mean, from what I understand, it's a relatively wealthy community and that kind of thing. So I'm sure that they have the money and the tax base to secure to make sure that they have a police department that's functioning properly and has the tools that they need. And I said, and if they don't, that falls on the executive.
Joe, let me ask you something that we haven't touched upon, and it's a little bit outside of the questioning, and maybe it'll come from left field. But I know that here in New York or in New Jersey, where I was a prosecutor, should you find a dead body, if his testimony is correct, 8 to 10 to 12 feet inside on your lawn, about maybe 60 feet from your front door, that the cops would come a knocking, but bum, 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 maybe a knocking with the search warrant for inside. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, we know that there's not there's a warrant issue if you have to get into that house, but knocking on the door and saying, you got a dead guy on your lawn, did you hear anything last night or see anything? I mean, yeah, that should be done.
Or are you in danger?
Right, but
There's a
like for
dead
instance,
guy out here.
or for instance, like I said, I mean, take a look at, it's snowing. That means the snow should be in pristine condition. Or their footprints from the house towards the body. I mean, those are things that I don't know if they got documented or they were able to discuss that. But to me, that would have been an important aspect of that, and saying, is there any indication that there are footprints in the snow that would have led this person either to come out or go in? That to me, I think, is a lost opportunity if it's not done.
Yeah. By the way, nationally, 66 donations. Apparently, Gallagher made $374,000 last year.
That
Well,
number's floating around, but it's been north of 300.
yeah, but whatever it is, I mean, obviously, the police officer for 32 years. I mean, I don't begrudge that at all. I think the police officers and anyone who's been in the public life, but I can see where people are upset about that.
Yeah.
When you're saying you can't afford to have a valid, you can't afford to put blood kits in your car, and yet you're doing these kind of, you're giving this kind of pensions to somebody. I can see where the community is very upset about that, and that's exactly what we think. We think that Karen Reed has become a vehicle for a lot of community upset. By the way, the police chief did ask for $200,000 for a new kitchen. Apparently, that was not granted. But so the money's there for this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I mean, it's apparent like the community is well off compared to other communities, and that they should have some of the basics to be able the cops to do their jobs, including proper training and the equipment that's needed to in order to process a scene. Because just like this, you can't have the attitude where, well, we're going to call the state police in and they're going to do it, because that's not the case initially with this investigation. So because of the weather kind of throws the monkey wrench into the thing, and they're forced to do it, and they are not prepared for it.
Yeah, I think folks are mad about, as much as anything, a bad job done in this case, and now he's rewarded. I know it's a bigger analysis than that, but here's this guy making decent money. Is this an example of the work he did when he was on the payroll?
Well, I mean, I don't know anything about the guy other than this case, right? So, I mean, it's just it's unfortunate that his whole legacy. I mean, he could have been, a top-notch person, but he left under the cloud of this case, and a lot of them have, and that's the problem, right? What's that famous saying is, the good that men do often gets interred with their bones, but the bad lives on forever.
And maybe it should. Maybe it should if they've charged a woman for murder when he shouldn't be charged for murder, and there's no evidence.
Yeah, well, like I said, we can discuss, the prosecutor's choice for murder, all day long. I don't know if I thought in the very beginning of this thing, I thought it was an overcharge, but that's just my personal opinion.
Yep, we've been talking that up. Yeah, so there wasn't much left on that. It was just the last couple of questions. I think Judge C basically hurried him along. Are you gonna be done today? And then he made a quick.
Yeah, I saw that.
Saying,
yeah, 2 minutes. You got 2 minutes.
Gotta go.
Wow.
Happy
Wow.
hour.
Yeah,
it's Cinco de Mayo day.
I got a soup on the stove. Let's go.
That's right. We got the blenders warming up. So so he'll be back tomorrow, and we'll finish this up. We'll see what crescendo he has for us tomorrow, Joe, because that's Alan Jackson. He ain't gonna just let this whimper away. Yeah, it's gonna be a big blow of some sort.
Yeah, he's set them up for something.
Yeah, yes. You've educated us a lot, and we're going to be looking forward with the education that you have given us here tonight. It's a great education in crime scene, how you really properly deal with a crime scene, if it is a crime scene. Even.
Well, you treat it as if it is one until it's not. That's the whole bottom line, because if it's not, you don't have anything to worry about.
Yep, and I think their feeling was, this won't be a crime scene by the time we're done. By the time we get this all handled properly, it'll go away, and it didn't. And now it's unfolding in front of everybody again. So,
and that would contradict the defense theory, right? That it was a cover up, and it was a this and that too. So it's a whole thing. This whole thing's intertwined.
Yeah, I mean that's why everybody's so fascinated by this case. So many levels. So one more time, where can everybody find you and watch your show? And is there a regular schedule or what?
Yeah, there's pretty much regular schedule. I had to take some time off for some health issues, but the issue so I usually do Tuesday nights and on Sunday. I usually have a show, live shows on that, and I bring in guests. I don't do much of the talking head stuff in regards to, just solo things. I usually have guests on to try to, like yesterday I had on Lisa Desire, who is a IgG expert, and she teaches forensics, and she used to work at the office chief medical examiner. And it's basically, I try to make things educational too, and
Sure.
and I like to learn from them too, because I don't know much about IgG, and we know that's the way of the future. So it's actually kind of interesting.
And that's forensic genealogy, right?
Yep.
For people that don't know. Right.
Yeah, that's the new wave. That's amazing stuff. The Golden State Killer was the seminal case on that. So,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
And we got the Rex Sherman too. That's going to be
Yeah.
big with the Fry hearings. I've been
That's
watching that real close.
Yeah, I know. You're right on it.
I know, and it's funny. This is totally out of the blue, but that case hasn't really resonated with as many people as you would think it might. And they continue to find bodies, and it just doesn't seem to have the grab. I'm not sure why, because it's a sad story for so many victims.
Sure, but also all crime is local too, right? So you're dealing with certain things that, everybody that lives on Long Island or New York City knows about it. But beyond that, I mean,
True.
look what's going on in New England. There's all kinds of craziness going on up there. I'm still following that thing too, but there's a lot of different MOs in that when you look at it and you look into that case. But there could be something underneath that.
Interesting. And Kohlberger too, with
really.
the genealogical DNA. So,
Well, talking about issues with crime scenes, we could talk about that too later on down the road.
Well, yep, we will. Well, we're going to hold you to that, because when that's coming up,
Yeah,
we'll
sure.
definitely need your expertise.
That's another horror show.
No doubt about it, in a totally different way. Wow. Okay, Joe. Well,
right.
good. So good to have you on. So nice to meet you.
It was a pleasure.
Having heard so much, I appreciate it. We'll catch you next time. There are many reasons to get this expert on, and we appreciate your time, Joe.
And I
Sounds
hope Joe was a good experience. You're willing to come back.
Oh yeah, listen. I mean, we were on over an hour and a half. Everything went.
I know. Well, thanks again, bud. Appreciate it.
You're
Take
welcome.
care.
Thank you, Jeff.
So nice.
Michael
Yeah,
Bryant,
I mean,
isn't he fabulous?
He's forgotten more than we'll ever figure out about this kind of stuff.
And he talked to us, and our viewers tonight. Sui Generis was Sui Generis. I have two words: do it. Free Karen Reed, justice for OJO. Sui Generis was back again. Debbie J. Nationally 66 and Madeira Beach caregiver has something. Before I go to Debbie J, obviously we answered her question. Very generous. She has real bail money for you. And this Madeira Beach caregiver who's always on with us. Jo was in sex crimes unit in Boston, was close with Birchmore killer Farwell. Jo was asked by SR and Higgins to hold Blue Line by keeping the name out of the investigation. So that's an issue. I've seen that floating around. I don't know if that's the truth, but it certainly would be an issue if he in somehow is related to the Birchmore investigation. The Sandra Birchmore, she's the young woman we've covered on this show that was, Michael went to see it in Stoughton, was initially ruled a suicide, now ruled a homicide by the feds. The state won't back down, still say they're not going to change it to suicide. As you all know, my husband was involved in the civil case in that case. Sandra
And that
Birchmore,
one is plodding along. They had a hearing a while back in federal court, and it's very secretive as to where they are exactly in that case. But we'll keep you apprised.
Yeah, there's another hearing in July. His hearing has been put off twice. Farwell's hearing, which kind of tells me something, but we'll save that for another day.
Well, that next hearing should be after this thing is over, after the Karen Reed case is over. So
yep.
Might be part 2 of this whole mess.
So anyhow, so all of you have been so very, very generous. Michael is going to be going back to Canton on Wednesday and Thursday of this week and giving you reports from there. And we'll be on the air tomorrow at 8:50 a.m. again. We'll be streaming all day and then having our live show at 6 p.m. So before Michael says his thing, I just have to say again, because you're all on, and it was like 1,200 of you. You please hit that like button and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything to like or subscribe. For all these people that give their time, people that are donating their money to keep us on the air. Great show, much appreciated. Making it count, adding in more for your bail to making it count, and also one of our followers.
We're going to have a big party if I'm not arrested. So,
okay, and hopefully the decision on the First Amendment will come down, and it'll be as supportive of the First Amendment as Judge Doolan was supportive of Aiden Carney's right to say what he has to say as a journalist on his show, because that's what we're doing right now. We're journalists.
We shall see. That could happen in any day. Arguments were today. Could happen any day. So, all righty. I guess we'll do something again tomorrow. In the meantime, I'm Michael Bryant. Try to do the right thing.
And I'm Linda Kenny Bodden. We will portal into tomorrow morning at 8:50. Again, before we go, hit the like, subscribe, share, and notify button. We'll see you tomorrow.
Ashes on the sky.